U.S. and Israel continue to say they've made substantial progress in wiping out Iran's missile capabilities. But Tehran has kept up its missile campaign targeting Israel and Gulf states. So how is it able to still fire back? And how much longer can it last? Precise assessments of Iran's current capabilities remain unclear, but it's estimated to have launched 400 to 500 ballistic missiles at Israel since the conflict began, and targeted more than 3,500 short-range missiles and drones at U.S. allies across the Gulf. Analysts note that Iran's missile launches are at a significantly lower tempo compared to the 12-day war with Israel last June. Iran has launched about 20 missiles a day at Israel, firing one or two at a time. But Tehran has managed to bomb specific targets with pinpoint accuracy. This was evident when it shot down a U.S. fighter jet over its territory last Friday. In its retaliatory strikes on Qatar's LNG infrastructure in Ras Laffan, and when it targeted Israel's secret nuclear facilities in Dimona. Experts believe Iran's missile fire is coming mainly from mobile launchers rather than Iran's missile cities, which have been heavily bombed by the U.S. and Israel. These mobile launchers require targeting preparations and fueling, meaning firing can take hours to plan. But they can fire, relocate, and blend into the landscape, making it harder for enemies to find and destroy them. Israel believes about 70% of Iran's launchers and missile stockpiles have been destroyed, while Washington determines it's destroyed around a third of Iran's missile arsenal. However, that may not mean Iran is running out of ammunition. U.S. intelligence reports this week say Iranian operatives have been digging out underground missile bunkers and silos, returning them to operation. While some bunkers and facilities appear to have been damaged in the U.S.-Israeli strikes, Iran has been able to rummage through those sites and retrieve launchers. Experts say Iran wants to retain as much of its missile launch capacity as possible so that it can continue to apply pressure as the war drags on. And while many of Iran's top leaders have been killed, its command system has adapted. The powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps have activated a so-called mosaic defense strategy, which is designed to empower field commanders during wartime. For a closer look at Iran's missile capabilities, let's speak to Dr. Malcolm Davis, Senior Analyst for Defense Strategy and National Security at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute. He joins us live from Canberra. Dr. Davis, thank you for making the time to speak with us today. I want to start off with, what do we know exactly about what's left of Iran's missile arsenal? And looking at the war so far, can we expect Iran to hold out for much longer?
Look, I think we have to assume a worst-case scenario that Iran still does have substantial missile capabilities, drone capabilities, as well as missile launch and missile manufacturing capabilities intact. Yes, the Americans have done very effectively in terms of attacking systems that they detect, but Iran is a vast country. And it has had plenty of time to actually manufacture large numbers of missiles and drones. And remember, it's not just about these missiles, it's also about the drone capabilities, which it can manufacture on a large scale very cheaply, very quickly. So systems like the Shahed drone capability. So I do think we have to make the safe assumption that we haven't essentially destroyed most of the Iranian missile and drone capabilities. We have to assume that there's still a substantial portion that are intact. That gives the Iranians the ability to continue to fight, to continue to impose damage and destruction across the region, including, importantly, against Gulf states in terms of their oil infrastructure and also their water desalination.
We keep hearing that the military operations are almost over. Have the U.S. and Israel been exaggerating their progress in wiping out Iran's arsenal?
I think it's very premature to say that military operations are almost over. I think all the indications are that, in fact, the Americans are probably preparing for an escalation in the bombing campaign. President Trump has indicated that they're going to go after energy infrastructure, potentially oil infrastructure, and also potentially water desalination. The Iranians are likely to retaliate in kind. And at the same time, the Americans are bringing in ground forces to secure places like Cargo Island, potentially to go after the stockpile of enriched uranium inside Iran at Isfahan. So I think it's very premature at this point in time to assume that the war will be over in 2 or 3 weeks. I think that the more realistic case is that this will continue to go on for many weeks, potentially quite a few months.
U.S. intelligence reports are saying that Iran is digging up underground bunkers and silos. Does that mean that the U.S. and Israel haven't really destroyed their capabilities? And what challenges might the U.S. and Israel face in completing their operation?
Well, certainly, as the Iranians dig up facilities and missile systems, the Americans and the Israelis can attack them again. The Americans do have a high degree of air superiority, not air supremacy or air dominance, but certainly air superiority over Iran. So they can operate relatively freely, and they can attack targets that are detected very quickly. And so the Iranians will always be racing against this clock to try and get their missile capabilities back into operation. The challenge, of course, I think, is more the drones. The systems like the Shahed can be launched off the back of a truck, so they're very easily hidden away and very easily able to be launched very quickly in what's known as a shoot and scoot type maneuver, where the system launches a series of drones and then moves very quickly away from the launch site. So I do think that the Americans and the Israelis will continue to attack those missile and drone capabilities, but ultimately the Iranians may continue to be able to last considerably longer.
Do you think Iran could still be holding on to its best and strongest weaponry?
It's possible. Certainly, they have advanced missile capabilities like the Khorramshahr 4, which have almost an intermediate range ballistic missile range of up to about 4,000 kilometers. It's possible that they can still continue to have a number of those. I think there's certainly the solid fueled missiles that can be launched very quickly as compared to liquid fueled missiles, which are highly vulnerable for many hours before they're launched, I think are the real worry. So I think that we need to watch what the Iranians have done with solid fuel missiles, with missiles with greater range, their ability to deliver cluster warheads on targets that are very difficult for ballistic missile defense systems to stop. And also, obviously, hypersonic weapons are also a concern, the sorts of things we've seen them use on occasion. So there are some real concerns there. The Iranians can continue to inflict significant damage across the region.
What have you noticed about Iran's military strategy? Have they been more careful in how they use their weapons?
Look, I think the military strategy is odd in the sense that their initial response to the American attacks and the Israeli attacks was to attack the Gulf Cooperation Council states. So UAE, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and so forth, which seemed odd because essentially whilst at the same time it increased the risk of overall damage and destruction to global oil infrastructure, potentially could have brought those states into the war on America's side. That hasn't happened yet, but I think it could, in which case the situation would be complicated for Iran. Having said that, of course, the other aspect of their strategy is they've closed the Strait of Hormuz. And I think that is the real dangerous part for the West, in the sense that the Iranians can continue to keep the Strait of Hormuz shut. There's no easy way for the Americans to actually force open the strait. And so the economic and energy crisis that is now enveloping the world will continue to grow. That will have a political impact. And I think their strategy is really about creating as much economic and energy chaos around the world as possible to impose that political cost on the US.
Thank you, Dr. Davis, for sharing your insights with us. We were speaking to Dr. Malcolm Davis, Senior Analyst for Defense Strategy and National Security at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute.